Today I'm going to walk you through how to do a line test on a few different surfaces so you know what font size and what line weight your individual setup at home can handle. Everyone's printing setup is different, so you're going to be able to hold different, line weights and fonts. So the first thing is to grab this artwork, and you just go to our free artwork page, and it's called the Ikonart print test. So download the SVG and save it to your desktop. And then you can open up whatever program you want. We're gonna just print this out of Vector today. So I'm opening up my Vector account and going to the SVG editor, creating a new artboard that's 8.5 by 11 print document. I always start with that just so I know for sure I'm printing on an 8.5 by 11, and then I import my SVG from my desktop. Then I can just right click and ungroup and get rid of this part on the bottom that just kind of explains what's going on. I'm just going to use the top part of the artwork to print that. So I'm going to group that again, and then I'm actually going to mirror mine. So I'm reflecting it using this button here, and then I'm just going to print. So the main thing when printing, of course, is to make sure all your settings are correct. So here I am just changing to make sure it's printing at 100% and like size-wise, that it's not scaling it at all. And then I go into my advanced settings, and I have mine saved as Ikonart, but I'm just going to walk you through real quickly what I have changed. So I have my paper setting as Pro Platinum here. And that is so that when I go into my print quality and click on custom, I can set it all the way to 1 to print as fine as possible. And then on the color and intensity, I can go in here, change it to dark, change my intensity all the way to dark, and my contrast all the way to high. And those are the settings that I use to print all of my Ikonart positives, and it prints nice and dark. I'm using my Canon Pixma IX6820 printer, and it's printing this slow. So you can tell that it's laying down more ink by how slow it's printing. If it would just shoot this out really fast, then that's printing too fast, and it probably means I forgot to change my print settings. So I'm just going to hold this up to a light so that you can see how dark it is. So I'm holding this up to my computer screen, and you can't see the words behind it at all. That is how dark your artwork should be printing. All right, now we're ready to make our stencil. So I'm just getting my stencil film out of the bag, and I'm not making a full sheet today. My artwork isn't a full sheet, so I'm just going to cut my stencil film down to size. And as you can see here, I'm starting with my blue stencil film, but I will make it on both colors just so I can test both colors of film, the blue and the purple. So here I'm just cutting off the extra, and then I put that back in the bag right away because I don't want the light to expose and harden it. So I always keep it protected in the bag. All right, and then I want to make sure that I'm really getting a good seal between my artwork and my stencil film, which this cover sheet helps with. So 2 of these come in every pack of film, and I'm just rubbing down really, really well. I don't want there to be any gap between my artwork and my stencil film. If there's a gap, that can cause light to get under the edges, and that will mess up your stencil, especially on the super fine lines that I'm testing. So I just exposed that for 35 seconds, and now I can take it to my sink to wash it out. Of course, I always soak my stencil in a little bit of warm water first. So I just put it in my sink with a tiny bit of warm water, and then I cover it with the clipboard while it soaks for 1 minute. And the clipboard helps to protect it from the light so that it's not continuing to expose or harden while it's soaking. I'm not working in front of a bright window or anything like that, but it still has the regular like room lights on in this room, and I don't want my stencil to continue to expose. That'll make washout really difficult. So now that it's been soaking for about a minute, I can wash it out, and I'm using, again, warm water, and I use our trigger jet nozzle that we sell on our website. This has a really nice pressure, so it makes washout go faster because the water pressure is so nice. I also like the flat spray on this. It works really well. So here you can see the areas that are thicker, like this home is where the craft stash is. Those areas are going to start to wash out faster than the fine lines. So I'm just keeping my nozzle moving. I'm not like focusing on one spot. And then I just move my stencil around and continue washing out. So this is really small text that I have on here. And then it's also lines that are different weights. So I have a 3-point, line, a 2-point line, a 1-point line, a 0.5 line. So basically what I'm doing is testing out how small I can have a font and how thick my lines can be. So this might be different for everyone. I might be able to hold finer lines when I'm making my stencils if my artwork printed a lot darker, or if my washout, if I have a stronger sprayer, or if it's just better conditions. So you might have different results than I have, just depending on your specific setup and how you're doing things. But here you can see where the thicker lines washed away really nice. And then this font is a really good test because it has thicker and thinner lines. So I'm just inspecting my stencil, and I'm just going to continue washing out a little bit to see if I can get some of those areas a little bit more clean. But again, this will depend on your sprayer, your water temperature, and how dark your artwork was, on if you're able to hold the same amount of detail as I am. I'm just inspecting it in between washing it out because I have really tiny fonts on here, so I want to see if I can get, them better washed out, but they are really small and I won't be able to hold the tiniest little font. So now let's just take it to a window to inspect. So you can see my solid areas washed out really easy and nice, no problem. Even these details washed out nice because the lines are fairly thick. Here you can see the thin lines on this font did not wash out as good. Those are super tiny and hard to hold. And then you can see here I have my line thicknesses. So 1-point line held just fine, 0.5 no. So that's too thin for my setup. So if my artwork was that thin, I would need to thicken it up a little bit. Here you can see the fonts. Yeah, those look good. I can go all the way down to a 5-point font with sans serif, or a thicker font. It looks great. However, a thinner font with serifs does not look as good. Even at 12, it looks just okay. So that's also something to note when you're doing fonts, is the style of font and, like what you can hold for that. So now we'll just dry it off quickly. And I'm just using my film dryer here, but of course you can let it air dry. And then once it's dry, I'll pop it back under my light to post expose it. And this just hardens it so that when I use it, I can reuse it, which I will be doing a couple times. So I'm just going to post expose for 2 minutes. And then once that's done, we are ready to test on a couple different surfaces. And while that blue stencil dries, I'll just go ahead, repeat the exact same process with my purple stencil film so that I have a purple and a blue stencil to test. And as you can see here, my purple results are pretty similar to my blue results. The purple stencil film has a thicker adhesive and a thicker mesh, so the results are going to be slightly different on the amount of detail you can hold. The blue holds slightly finer detail, but as you can see from these results, it's not that different. This looks pretty much the same. These are looking very similar as well, where those thin lines did not, hold as good, and then these two pieces of artwork look great. All right, now let's test our surfaces. So I have a wood round here, a chalkboard, and a shirt. So I'm going to use the stencils on these actual surfaces to see how they look with paint going through them. And I'll just speed through the actual making of them because we don't need to be here all day. But I'm just using chalk paste and, some black acrylic paint on this one. And here you can see the results. So all those lines held really nicely here. You can see how the fonts hold. The serif font does not look the greatest when it starts getting smaller. The sans serif font looks fine. Our 1-point line looks fine. And then this design is okay. It breaks up in some areas where those lines are really thin. So if I was going to actually be making this, I would thicken those lines up a little bit in my artwork program. All right, now let's see what it looks like on a shirt. And for this, I'm just using Speedball fabric ink, of course, on my shirt like always. And here you can see the results on that. So this looks pretty good. Again, very similar results, I would say. These lines, breaking up right there and holding a 1-point line, pretty good. 0.5, no. And then again, the font's looking, similar to the wood results, I would say. And lastly, I'll use it on a chalkboard. I just washed this blue stencil and I'm reusing it. It's the same stencil I used on the wood. And again, I'm using chalk paste. And again, the results are pretty similar to the other surfaces. You can see here, the fonts look they look okay on the chalkboard, but again, the 1-point line held. And again, these lines look pretty much the same as on the wood, not too different. So if you have any questions about, what your setup can handle, how small of a font you can print, how skinny of a line you can print, just go ahead and download this artwork from our website and run your own test.